Should be good. Yes. Brilliant. So all I was saying was, hi everyone. Okay, so I'm going to talk today about the EAP context, which I'm working in, the cohort and the student needs. And now is my PowerPoint not working? Okay, and then I'm going to share some findings that I have from this course that I was teaching on. I'll make some links to the literature and discussion. There might be time for Q&A, but of course I'm in the pre-lunch slot, so I'm aware of the time. Okay, so let me tell you first of all about the context which I'm working in. So I'm working on an MA Film Studies course at the university, and let me tell you about it. So it launched in September 2020. It's a team-taught course with Faculty of Arts, Humanities and Cultures, and also with industry experts, so with external facing people as well. And it was set up to appeal to an international, so-called international student cohort and different types of students. So those coming from practice-based backgrounds as well as academic backgrounds. So I'm working on the academic literacies program, which is embedded into one of the core modules. So that was set up so that all students, regardless of their backgrounds, would be able to fully engage with the course. And what my interactions look like is a 2-hour seminar per week. And I also co-mark and assess presentation with the module leader that I'm working with. And they also thought that the academic literacies program would be a point of consistency, given that it's a team-taught program. All right. So let me tell you now a little bit more about the academic literacies cohort. So we started in year one. In year one, we had 13 students and it was delivered online. So that was a new course that year. And year two, which we've just finished, there were 40 students and it was in person. Okay. So the composition of the class is approximately 80% international students, mostly from China, and they're mostly using English as an additional language. And we've also got approximately 20% home students, mostly British students, using English as a dominant or only language. So at this point, I just want to acknowledge that I am being distracted by things happening on the screen. Okay, I just want to acknowledge that I understand that this terminology can be problematic, as B points out in her book. I think it's B there, B Bond's book, mentioning about this problematic language, about talking about natives and non-natives and international students and home students. So I acknowledge that, but you might see that this terminology is used in some of my findings because it's the language that the students have used to describe themselves and other students too. Okay, so on my academic literacies program, I had a needs analysis with the students to find out what kind of things they were worried about. So their perceived challenges and worries included a lot of the things that I think we could guess that would be there. Things like becoming a postgrad student, managing the workload, reading, having to write a lot, and so on and so forth. And the thing that they were worried about the most, in terms of the greatest number of people mentioned, they were worried about delivering presentations and oral communication was the biggest concern for them. Here are a couple of quotations from my students. So they talk about being nervous about talking to other people. They also said, some students mentioned about this fear being related to language use and working with different types of people. So for that reason, that made me think about how the academic literacies program is related to intercultural competence, intercultural communication. So usually we think about our EAP programs as, you know, working on the students' language and skills in lots of different areas, like I've already mentioned, reading, writing, and so on. But maybe we don't look so much at intercultural competence. And Douglas and Rosvold also say that it's overlooked in the EAP literature. So I thought that given that we've got these different types of students coming together, it's a great opportunity to explore the theory. And at this point, I want to say that my background is not in intercultural communication. I'm an EAP practitioner. So I'm coming, just starting to get to know this theory. So just to clarify, the definition that I'm working with today is from Fantini, and I'm thinking about intercultural competence in terms of it being defined as complex abilities that are required to perform effectively and appropriately when interacting with others who are linguistically and culturally different from oneself. Okay, so that's the definition that I'm working with today. Right, so now I want to tell you a little bit about things that I observed, things I learned from my first year of working on the academic literacies program with this cohort. All right, so I noted there were some communication challenges between students. So for example, I put some students into the, reading groups and asked them to work together. I think it was Liz mentioned earlier about throwing students into groups together and hoping for the best. Perhaps that's what I did. But one student got back to me and sent me an email, and this student said, so this was a Holmes student, "We have fallen into a pattern of me leading the group with the others often struggling to understand the texts at all. I suspect due to a language barrier." Okay, so from that comment, plus another situation where I had asked the students to get into groups for their assessed presentation, and I told them you can pick which groups you want to work in yourselves, and they chose, for the most part, monolingual, monocultural groupings. And I thought, you've got such a great opportunity to work with somebody different, learn something new from someone else, that, I felt like it's a pity that they didn't, work with some different types of people there. So I thought, okay, maybe, right, the students definitely need a bit more guidance and practice with working with people who are from a different background to them, and also different background in terms of being a practice-based background or an academic background, regardless of where the students were coming from as well. All right, another student said something very interesting as well about at the end of year one. So this student said, "This is the first time I worked with students from a different linguistic background, and I found that people didn't really care if I was speaking English grammatically correctly. It helped me to be more willing to communicate with them." So I thought, well, isn't this interesting that the academic literacies program could be a great opportunity both to work with other people and to challenge your own preconceptions about what those people think. All right. So based on those things, those observations from year one, in year two, I tried to do things a little bit differently or add a little bit more to help students with working with each other. So one of the first things I did was shared an anonymized summary of the needs analysis results to show, okay, you're worried about this, so are loads of other people in the class, right? So we shared the concerns very early on. I also had lots of opportunities to talk about what are the challenges and opportunities in working with others from different backgrounds, be that cultural, educational, or linguistic, and had some time, different times to reflect on students' own communication styles and their maybe assumptions about if a student is quiet, what could it mean, and so on. So we had some discussions about that. And I tried to emphasize that communication is a two-way process rather than, as Douglas and Rosvold say, a narrow one-way flow of EAP students needing to adapt to local norms. So that was not the message in my academic literacies program. It was more that it was everyone's responsibility to try to communicate effectively with each other. And this time for the group presentation, I decided that this is a good opportunity to work with the cultural other and to reflect on this. So I allocated the students into groups rather than giving the chance to self-select, because I thought, well, there is one learning outcome on group work. And if we're thinking about employability skills, we don't pick and choose who we work with in the real world either. So let's do that for this group presentation situation. Okay, and the team work was also peer assessed. just if I can say that there as well. Let's see my hide. Okay, right. So let me tell you about the findings that I got from this academic literacies program. So these findings come from the year just gone. So I'm picking some examples from mid-semester 1 feedback, where I gave them a questionnaire and I got 12 responses. And you'll see that I've written SEM 1, indicating it's from midway through semester 1 on some of the findings. Almost everything is from the end of semester 2 feedback. So I got 19 responses. I've coded the students as just being S1, S2, S3, and so on. I haven't identified students by background or anything because I didn't ask them for that information. I'm going to share some quotations and some things that the students said in their feedback. Oh yeah, and my questions were mostly open-ended, not all, but mostly, and I asked them things including, what's the area of greatest improvement you've noticed in yourself in working with people from different cultural and linguistic backgrounds? Oh no, so the first one is, what is the greatest improvement you noticed in yourself in your maybe language skills, academic skills, and so on from doing this academic literacies program? The changes that you've noticed when working with different types of people, the most positive aspects of the academic literacies program. I asked other things as well, like what things can we improve and so on, but I haven't included that here just because of the time limit. Right, so I'd like to look now at some themes and answers from those questions. Right, so the first area that I want to look at is what the students picked as being the area of greatest improvement. I had thought, so I'd give them a list of things, you know, reading skills, research skills, you know, writing, so on and so forth. And I thought that they would have picked writing as the number one thing that they had improved on. But I was actually surprised to see that they picked the number one. I hope you can see it there. Number one was working more effectively with others from a different cultural or linguistic background. So 12 out of 19 respondents chose that. And then research and academic writing skills was in second place with 11 students choosing that. So I just thought I was surprised when I saw that feedback. Okay. All right. The next finding I'd like to move on to is see a photograph there. Okay. The next finding is fear. So fear of working with others and fear about language use. So this was really prominent in the open-ended questions. So the students talked about being afraid to speak, being worried, again, concerned about what other people think about them. But this fear, they seem to overcome this fear as well. So there were also comments about feeling more confident and feeling better about overcoming these worries. So in these comments, you can see that the students talk about being afraid, being shy, being nervous at first, and then having the opportunity to work with other people and then feeling more able and confident to work with others and to share their opinions. Okay, so I've got just a couple more examples of that, about being nervous, about expressing ideas, and again, about the dreaded presentations and then becoming a bit more courageous to deliver a presentation. Okay, so another comment that the students mentioned was communicating with university staff. And this again was something I hadn't really thought about too much. So they said, so one student mentioned about how because they had become familiar with me, then they were better able to talk to other module leaders and their supervisor. And I hadn't even thought about that, about, you know, that impact. Yeah, so there were lots and lots of positive views, lots of appreciation for having the opportunity to work with different people and about not having the chance to do that outside of our classes. And one student told me, if it wasn't for your classes, we actually wouldn't talk to each other at all. So I thought that was an interesting point too. Yeah, so the students really appreciated having the chance to talk to different people, and they also had a lot of appreciation for each other's perspectives and different opinions. And I really liked how this student 16, phrased it. It made me feel the charm of multiculturalism. I thought that was a really nice way of phrasing it. Okay, so as well as this, of course, there were some challenges. So students mentioned that there were challenges when they were talking with each other, and that they also needed more time because of this barrier, this English barrier that they had identified. Yes, the next finding I wanted to highlight was the importance of listening skills, and things that students noticed about their own listening skills after these chances to communicate with different types of people. So someone said they became more patient, someone listens more carefully now. And I really like this too, that this student felt like, okay, other people are listening to me, and now I feel more confident to share what I want to say, and it is really nice. Okay, but the biggest point was the increased confidence in speaking to or working with others. So 17 out of 19 students wrote about that in their feedback, that they had improved their confidence. All of the students mentioned improved confidence, but the other two talked about writing. But everybody talked, 17 mentioned speaking and confidence improvement. So they talk about becoming more confident and sharing their opinions and expressing themselves. I think this is the final finding that I have. So the last thing was students mentioned about the academic literacy seminars being a relaxed, supportive environment. Again, which is something I hadn't thought about too much, but it seemed to be important for them. So they talked about being able to communicate better because it was a relaxed atmosphere, and just in general feeling better because other people had the same problems or they could share their anxieties. Actually, one of the module leader came to observe a couple of my classes, and heard the students talk about, oh, I'm really worried about this, I'm worried about that. At the end of it, she said, my goodness, it's like a group therapy session. Everybody's sharing all of these worries. Okay, so now I'm going to make some links to the literature. So the first area I want to highlight is about fear and opportunities to overcome it. So Hua mentions language learning anxiety, and this seemed to be quite prevalent in the feedback, that there's a fear of not being understood or being laughed at because of accent or making mistakes is often reported by learners. And Holmes and O'Neill mention that developing intercultural competence involves this process of acknowledging reluctance and fear, and also questioning stereotypes. And they also talk about the role of emotion in developing intercultural competence. So that made me think about our EAP classroom. So things I think we do anyway, but just as a reminder for us, that the needs analysis is really important in understanding fears and in helping students to understand that they're not the only one feeling that way, and how important it is that our classrooms are safe spaces to discuss things freely and to talk about fears. And I really try my best to emphasize that everybody's respected in the classroom, regardless of your background or your language proficiency, or so that students are working together and co-constructing meaning, and not having a dominant group within the class. The next link I'd like to talk about is the opportunities that we have in our EAP classrooms. So first one, for group work, interaction and relationship building. So as Byram points out, successful communication, it's not just about information exchange, it's also on establishing and maintaining relationships. And again, I think it's something maybe that we overlook or think it's not overly important, but I think that it really is. Again, Our EAP classrooms also give the opportunity for self-reflection, which underpins the development of critical cultural awareness. And Fantini mentions that intercultural competence evolves over time. There are periods of stagnation and even regression, which I think is good for us to know, because it's not a linear process, and maybe some things that we try don't always work out well, or you kind of think like, oh, I've done all this hard work, but have I made any progress? So just some reminders for us. It's an ongoing process. Maybe if we feel disheartened that we haven't achieved much, you know, that's okay, and it's part of the journey with it. And to be maybe persistent with our classroom management, things that we normally do anyway. Give the students a chance to work with different people, talk to each other, and yes, and have those times where you can think, okay, well, how effective was I in that situation, and what could I do differently next time? I'm nearly finished. Okay, and then the next part I want to mention is about the role of confidence. So B. Bond says that given that lack of confidence is one of the issues identified by students as reducing their cultural capital, the importance of this role should not be dismissed. I think that's really important for us. Holmes and O'Neill also say linguistic competence is not an indicator of intercultural competence. So some reminders for us is that we're not just building confidence. I think we maybe underestimate how important that is. And I think that's something that we should value in our roles in academic literacies or in-sessional programs. Our own personal intercultural experiences of value. So I know all of my colleagues in EAP, we've all lived in lots of different places. We've worked with different types of people. You know, we're very experienced ourselves in being communicators. So I think that is a really valuable thing to have when working with all of these different students, and maybe showing the students who think they're good communicators that, well, you know, you've got some work to do as well to make yourself a bit more, you know, a bit more competent when working with different types of people. Yeah, so I think it's also very important to keep in mind that just because somebody's a native speaker or using English as their only language, you know, as Adrian mentioned earlier, you could be at a deficit if you only speak one language, because you're missing out on a whole host of other thoughts, experiences, and so on that our students with, you know, multi-languages are coming with. Okay, and yes, how important listening is as well in being a good communicator. Last couple of reflections. Right, did the students' intercultural competence improve? Really, I'm just going by how they felt about it and their own self-perception. So I'm not really in a position to judge if they really did get better in reality. But if they feel more confident, felt better about it, I was happy with that. You know, I'm happy to accept that. And just to mention about my data collection, again, as with these things most of the time, it was a bit rushed, end of semester. I would love to have done interviews. I didn't have time to do it. But I'm going, and as well that these students were talking about feeling more confident about communicating with each other. They were in person for the first time after being online and, you know, alone during COVID. So maybe that was part of it as well. So next time I'll get the students to complete their feedback just after the group presentation rather than the end of the semester. Yes, last thing. It's an ongoing process. So I was so pleased when I got this feedback and thought, wow, like the students have really started to get to know each other and they're working together. This is great. And then at the end of semester, so I left with that feedback thinking, right, yeah, this is brilliant. And then I went to a film studies mini conference a couple of weeks ago. And I watched the students come into the room, and all the Chinese students sat on one side and all the home students sat on the other side, and nobody talked to each other. And I thought, oh, for goodness sake, I thought I'd made all this progress, but it was good to read and think about what Fantini had said, is that it's an ongoing process, and there can be regression, or, you know, it's not be disheartened if people aren't always working together. Okay, so final thing I want to say is that obviously IC and ICC theory has a lot of importance for our EAP context. I'm just at the beginning of my journey with reading and getting to grips with all of the different theories, but I've found that it has been very valuable and helped me to just think through some of my thoughts about what we do in our EAP classrooms. So those are my references, and thank you very much for listening. Is it lunchtime?
We do have 5 minutes for questions, and I did ask questions online. So do you want me to do them, or is Jodie doing
questions online?
Yeah, there are just 2.
So there's, if we start with questions from our online colleagues, some person, sorry, Hannah is asking just quickly if the academic literacies course was embedded and if it was credit bearing.
Yes, so it was. So it was part of a credit bearing core module. And my classes, they did a assess presentation, which was worth 10% of that core module. So it was, that element was credit bearing in that sense, and the classes were scheduled, which helps as well. Yeah, so.
And perhaps then related a little bit to Timothy's question about how co-marking with subject specialists was done.
Yes, okay, so actually we got the students to, I got the students to co-create the assessment criteria with me, and we went through various rounds and showed them to the module leader, and when everyone was happy with them, we had an element which was peer marked, that the students would, we should be looking here, right? That the students marked an element about teamwork. So they marked each other and how effective they were with teamworking. In terms of co-marking with the module leader, it has been great. So it's somebody that I work really well with. And I think that, you know, it kind of is luck of the draw who you're working with, but like my module leader on that module is great. And so what we do is we both mark together, we double mark, but I kind of take the lead on the communication aspect, how clear the message was, how well it was structured, and so on. And she takes the lead on anything to do with content. But we kind of, you know, we do work together. And, you know, if we have, if any disagreements, we meet in the middle, but we're usually on the same page. So we've done 2 years of the marking now, and it seems to be going well. Touch wood.
Okay. I guess we'll take a few more from online, and then perhaps some hands from in the room. So Tim Radner says, thank you. I do a similar arts and humanities course for MAs with a presentation assessment that's credit bearing, and have found similar challenges in communication. He's wondering, do you have any plans to link up with the film department to embed some of these practices in their main program?
So we're going to change the so we do link up because the students actually have to present on the topics that are taught within their core module. So it is linked in terms of the content. But we're going to change the assess presentation. So it's still going to be a group presentation in the upcoming year, but we're going to try a pitch. So I'll let you all know how that goes. So it's a film pitch, or something to do with pitching an idea, pitching a potential project. So it could be an academic project, could be an idea for a film, could be another like a film festival idea, or so on. So to give more opportunities to students who are from a practice-based background to bring in their knowledge as well. Does that answer the question? Maybe that doesn't answer the question at all.
I think I'll take the last point from online, and then we'll shift here. I'm kind of gauging there's 27 people online. It was 40 before we started the question. So clearly they're less, you guys are trapped, but so one more point from online, and then Lada will pick yours up after. So Rina raises a point about living and teaching in different countries does not make someone necessarily interculturally competent, and makes the suggestion that intercultural competency literature might be part of the CPD for an EAP tutor.
Mm-hmm. Yes, agreed. Yeah, working on it as we speak. Yeah. Anna, you want to ask something?
Yes, thanks for your presentation. I'm just interested, given your interest in intercultural competence and experience assessing students' presentation, do you think intercultural competence should be part of the oral assessment? So should it be a descriptor in assessing presentations.
Yeah, I'm not sure if everybody can hear you, but Anna was asking, should intercultural competence be part of the descriptors when assessing the students? Yeah, I was thinking about that today actually, and I was wondering if it should be a component within teamwork. You know, is this person effective to, well, we do have that. Is this a person who's effective to work with without mentioning about culture? So yeah, I don't know. I'm still thinking about that. What do you have any thoughts on that? No.
I mean, I know we actually had a very interesting conversation just now.
Yeah.
Thinking it's very easy to kind of go into ticky boxy.
Yeah.
Active listening, nodding.
Yeah.
How do you measure that?
Yeah.
Question.
So maybe that's something that would be good to talk about over lunch. Yeah. All right. So shall I just stop there then?
That was also the topic of the previous workshop, very
Yes.
much. So a good thing to link together.
We've got one last question from Alison.
I may have missed it, Deirdre, but
Yeah.
What was it you were actually doing in your seminars? Which was, I mean, what were you getting students to do?
In what? Academic literacy seminars in
your
general?
academic literacy seminars, yeah.
In most of the seminars, we were thinking about helping the students to work towards assignments, developing writing skills, reading strategies, you know, how to put together an annotated bibliography, how to summarize effectively. So all of those things as well. But I made links to the group presentation with this, you know, working together, being a good communicator. So, you know, I used that as a kind of a place to kind of frame this type of work. But also, you know, the students didn't know each other well and they didn't really have a chance to bond. So I kind of thought that our academic literacy sessions as well are a chance for them to, you know, share experiences about what's going on in their film studies course, and to bring problems and talk about those things or things that were unclear and so on. So those discussions kind of came out of those things. And we also had things like, you know, miscommunications with supervisors, those types of things. So yeah, I just had our class as a place to come and share, you know, oh, you had your first supervisor meeting this week. How did that go? Or, you know, to just have an open discussion chance about miscommunication, misunderstandings, those type of things. So I just sort of, you know, responded to what students were bringing to the classes as well.
I just wondered whether there had been a deliberate focus on intercultural competence, but it sounds that was sort of indirect.
There had been more of a focus because of my experience of year one, where there was these misunderstandings between students. So yeah, I was conscious about it, but I try to make it explicit to students why I was doing that. Yeah.
Right, fascinating. I think we could talk about that, ask lots of questions over lunch, which is back where we were previously.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. So,
Yeah, are you?
I think that's my watch.
We'll hear your questions. And, thanks very much. See you in the next session.